Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of 11 Rebels, a Japanese samurai action movie from 2024 that stars Takayuki Yamada, a man we've seen in some of Takashi Miike's movies from back in the day. At least that's where I saw him first. Films such as the Crow's Zero franchise, as well as 13 Assassins. More recently, he's been seen in The Naked Director, which got some love. Now, 11 Rebels was directed by Kazuya Shiraishi, who previously gave us Birds Without Names from 2017, The Blood of Wolves from 2018, and the follow-up to that one, The Last of the Wolves from 2021. Now, the following plot synopsis was paraphrased from the Japan Times. It's July 1868, and the lowly Shibata Domain is trying to make sure it ends up on the winning side, having pledged allegiance to the Northeastern Coalition, an alliance of samurai holdouts. The domain's young lord is now considering defecting to the newly formed imperial government, and his chief retainer, played by Sadao Abe, needs to buy some time before an impending visit from the latter's army. So he comes up with a distraction. Dispatch a suicide squad to defend a strategic fortress on the border of the domain. And this motley gang consists mainly of felons, some of whom, like Masa, played by Takayuki Yamada, had been recruited straight from the execution ground, along with a handful of other samurai are helping out here. So this film opens with Takayuki Yamada's character running home to find his wife, who was just recently assaulted. And he immediately finds the perpetrator and murders him, understandably. But that's what lands him on death row. And he's about to get the axe when, he's pulled off and given this opportunity to win his freedom by, defending this fortress. Meanwhile, Sadao Abe's character is dealing with this young lord that the plot synopsis mentioned. He's like this young kid who's kind of a douchebag, aggressive personality, no concept of finesse or nuance in his decision-making or leadership. In any case, Abe decides to go through with this plan. And yes, so our protagonists go to this fortress early on and they do some manual labor. And then within the opening, I'd say 30 minutes, the attacks start coming in fast and furious. Now, one observation I made about this movie is that the runtime of the streaming version that I watched was 120 minutes, 2 hours right on the nose. But some websites, like the Japan Times being one example, specifically reviewed or mentioned a 155-minute cut. So that's 35 additional minutes of footage that's missing or excluded from the version we currently have in the United States to watch online. Now, I typically prefer shorter runtimes anyways. If you're a subscriber to this channel, you know this, with a few exceptions. But in this case, I could kind of feel the lost footage. Like, for example, that crazy young lord that they introduced near the beginning, and his advisors, and Sadao Abe's character specifically, just disappear from the movie for like almost the entire runtime after that, half-hour introduction. And it just felt kind of weird. You know what I mean? Like, I'm assuming that that's the footage that was cut from the American release to make it more of a faster-paced movie. I'm not sure, but I suspect that's the case, which I was kind of hoping they would go back and forth between the fighting at the fortress and then, the Lord back at the main area, figuring out strategies and different conflicts going on there. Would have mixed things up a little bit, but in any case, what remains is a very simple and streamlined film. Our protagonists spend most of the movie fighting off attacks in this remote location. Good amount of action, and it's pretty entertaining. We have a good nighttime sword fight around the 30-minute mark. Pretty good fighting here. Nothing exceptional. This isn't like the Rurouni Kenshin live-action films or anything like that, but, it's just good, solid sword fights. And when that scene hits, you'll notice that this movie is going to have some bloody violence and deaths to enjoy, which I'm usually a fan of. Nothing too gratuitous here, but it's effectively violent. The action design and the physics are mostly realistic as well, although, these characters are shooting like, on occasion, they'll shoot like those old ancient guns, and their accuracy with those guns is pretty exceptional. It was a little bit distracting, but whatever. That's a minor gripe. This also has a little bit more of a modern vibe, as opposed to like a classic samurai movie. You get like a classic vibe there in terms of, you know, the way the film is shot and things like that. This movie has like a slightly lighter tone despite the violence, and it also uses some CGI, which gives it a more modern feel. Not an excessive amount of CGI, but it does pop up. Also, the camera work is a little bit more focused and intense in 11 Rebels compared to like a classic samurai flick. My favorite scene in the movie involves a cannon assault. So they shoot cannons and some pretty heavy weaponry at this fort. And the battle tactics in that scene are similar to actual historical examples of what people did when they were kind of outnumbered and outgunned, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty lengthy scene and probably my favorite scene in the movie. And then you get a few good, you know, 2-on-1 sword fights and stuff like that. And then the finale is mostly just like an act of survival when our protagonists just try to survive the final assault. You know what I mean? So the action in this movie is pretty satisfying, and it's probably the main reason to watch this. You know, the acting and the production values are good, and there are bits of effective drama sprinkled in, but the story in this is really nothing special, and we've seen stuff like this before. But I think 11 Rebels is a good flick. I recommend it. It's currently available streaming on YouTube. And as always, folks, we'll see you next time.